With the lower section of our face, you know, the mouth and jaw and all of those, you know, connected bits now done, then the ordinary and obvious next step might be to move on to the upper face, and that's perfectly fine, you know, you can go about that if you want to. But as we run through this, I'm going to take a sidestep into another area of the rigging and the automation little bits and pieces that we can put on it to add more detail to our lower face section here first. And this is going to have to do with supplying additional shaping, principally through morphing or displacement. Obviously, we've got lots of nice, you know, control and deformation control here from the bones, but there's only so much you can do. And start doing, you know, certain things, putting in really fine details would require, you know, a great many bones, plus you'd have to have workings for how those bones interacted with all the others. That could start to get a bit cumbersome. And I don't just mean interacted in the case of controlling their positions, rotations and whatever else. I also mean, of course, how they interact with their influence on the mesh. As such, getting the larger mechanical movements with the bones, which is what we've been doing, is the thing that they are best placed for, but then getting the finer details is better served with displacement. Now, we already saw, of course, in the simple rig, hooking up a couple of simple morphs to our controllers, where we did things in the eyebrows and stuff like that. And we are largely going to be following the same process here, but we are going to be doing things a little differently. And we're going to be doing that with respect to the way that we've got our rig built. Again, you know, we've got the control rig and the deform rig. We've separated out the two. One thing that can be handy when you are animating characters is that when you've finished your animation, like completely finished it, is to take your motions and just bake it down, bake it to keyframes. This means that when you go to render, having something, you know, oddly switched, like maybe IK turned off or something like that that you might miss, isn't going to cause you, you know, any kind of errors that you only realise once you get the renders back. This is especially true if you're going to, you know, go out on a render farm or something. You shouldn't expect that such errors would occur, but baking is so quick and simple to do that for the sake of safety, it's probably the better option. And of course, that's one of the reasons why we like having this control deform rig separation, is because what we can do at the end of our animation is just bake all of the bones. We can then delete the control rig and all of our, you know, movements and animation is just there on bones on keyframes. The thing, of course, if we're going to be driving morphs or other displacements, is they need a reference item, you know, just like we've been doing for the nodal motions on the nose and the chin and whatnot. And what we also don't want to happen is to bake stuff off or delete stuff out and then have lost those points of reference. As such, when you are setting up displacements to be driven by the actions of the rig, it's generally best practice to have those displacements tied to the motions of the bones themselves. Because no matter what you bake, no matter what you delete, you're going to want to keep the bones. They're always going to be there. Unless, of course, you've decided to bake to MDD, in which case it doesn't matter, but it still remains that as a point of practice, the best way to go is to tie things to bones. So let's just take a look at, you know, the basic of how we're going to do this here. I'm just going to select my main head mesh, turn on edit nodes. Okay, I want such morphs to always occur before bones. So we set that there. Open up the nodes, and what I've got already set up, let me just grab it, morph map, is I have already created here just a stupid little morph for the purposes of demonstration, which is handily named L, and you can see it's just this stupid bulge of the nose, right? So let's go ahead and link that to a bone, and we'll use the jaw as an example. Now obviously for bones we need a bone info, so we're going to use good old DP kits item info to get a bone info node. I'm going to get the vector scalar here, which I'm just going to take from the rotation and grab, of course, Y to get the pitch. Obviously this is going to be outputting radians, but if we remember the jaw's got quite a large range of motion, you know, it comes down to like 20-30 odd degrees here, which is half a radian, so that would be outputting 0.5-ish, at least it would if I go into the bone info node and make sure to select the deform rig and of course the jaw bone. Then we see that it's outputting, what's that, 0.34. So if I plug this into morph, then that's 34% morph. So for the sake of this demonstration, that's simple enough, and we just plug that to the displacement input, and there we have it. And what we see is that this is interactive. You see it's coming on as I'm turning the null here, so that's all nice and lovely. And this basic setup, obviously there'll be more, you know, complexity to it when we set it up for certain things, but that's the basic idea behind it. Of course, just as we saw with the simple rig, if we're going to have a lot of morphs, this node space can start to get pretty full pretty fast, gets pretty confusing and pretty messy. So what we will also want to do is to nest, you know, each of our major adjustments probably within its own compound. And so you'd take something like this, we could cut it and we could paste it in here and plug that to the output, and of course if we go, then that would just plug up here, and it doesn't then seem to work, and there's a reason for this. It's just a little bug with the DP node. When you cut and paste a bone info, for some reason it just loses the bone reference. You see, I just have to go and set that back to jaw. So generally when we are doing this, it's usually best practice to just set up each one in its own compound to begin with. That way you don't have to worry about, you know, references getting lost and then having to pick back over the whole thing again afterwards.